A very, very good evening. A warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine. Welcome from yet another location, traveling around the world at the moment after so long spent stuck in one particular spot. The world has opened up ever so slightly, and today I find myself in Durban, where the locals are in a state of panic, not because of any unrest, but because the temperature has dropped below 30 degrees, and they all think it's the end of the world, and they're all wearing scarves and woolly hats and mittens and freezing to death. But they are as warm in their hospitality as ever, particularly here at Mount Edgecombe Country Club. It is a day which I've been part of for some time now, a golf day in support of the Police, Widows and Orphans Fund that I come down to Durban to host once a year and raise money for a cause that, like so many charities, I wish didn't have to exist, but sadly in South Africa does and is in need of great support. And today, with the help of Mike Proctor, the cricket great, and a number of Durban celebrities, plus a whole lot of Durban businesses, we've been able to support the Police, Widows and Orphans Fund. And as soon as I'm done with the show, I'll be jumping next door to host a dinner, raise some money, and help out those kids, those widows who have unfortunately become victims of the crime in South Africa. So thank you, Mount Edgecombe, for hosting us. And thank you to three wonderful wine brands, four wonderful women who join me today as our Women in Wine celebration continues through August. Now, we've had a terrific month so far. If you missed the show on Monday, on Women's Day, we had Siobhan Thompson, our CEO of Wines of South Africa, headlining show. It also included Chipang Molasana, the wine writer. We had Katie Bailey, who joined us from Pick and Pay, Irene de Fleuriot from La Brie, and Wave Colifson at Element House. And the week before, a whole pile of women writers, women winemakers, just generally women in wine. And it has been both an inspiring and an enlightening month on the show so far. Today, though, today we go beyond just South Africa. We go right around the world. We have two Americans on the show. Don't worry, we will have subtitles. Two very influential Americans, two of my favorite people in the South African wine industry. We also have a local who works with one of those South Africans, and together they make for a formidable team, and their partnership has extended into a brand new range of wine that is getting people genuinely excited, not just for some quality wine, but also the message and story behind that wine. And we're also drinking some Prosecco today, because tomorrow, yes, you thought I might have forgotten, tomorrow is International Prosecco Day. Now, technically it means you're supposed to bath in Prosecco and then just drink it for the rest of the day. Open a bottle at some point tomorrow. I think for me with Prosecco, a really interesting thing is to compare it with our Cup Classique. What's similar, what's different? And although we're very much a champion of South African wine on this show, I love trying wine from broader field to see what the differences are, see how South African wine compares, and see what the rest of the world is doing. And we can hardly ask the rest of the world to keep drinking and buying South African wine if we don't drink and buy a little wine from the rest of the world in return from time to time. So we drink Prosecco today. We also drink some wonderful Syrah, a little bit of barrel fermented Sauvignon Blanc, with our four superstar guests on Dan Really Likes Wine today, brought to you by Pick and Pay out of a freezing cold Durban. And so, warm welcome to Andrea Mullineux and Gynore Fredericks from the Mullineux team, Samantha O'Keefe from Lismore, and Olivia Pretorius, who joins us from Valdo. Guys, welcome to all of you, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I have our favorite Americans back on the show, and a couple of new guests. So lovely to see you all. Let's start there, if we may, Madam Chair, because we have to address you very formally, because you are the chair of the Cape Winemakers Guild, and we can actually look you in the eye. You're very important now. And I don't want it to be too sad or too somber, even though it has been a sad couple of days in the wine industry. I'd rather to celebrate, if we can, an extraordinary life. We said goodbye yesterday to the extraordinary Dame P. Bailey, a man who was such a part of the South African wine fabric, did so much, not just in pinotage, across the board with Distel, always had a twinkle in his eye, always had a warm smile, always willing to sit and talk and share a story and be so engaged. He was such a wonderful man. We'll miss him terribly, Andrea, but he also does leave behind such a wonderful legacy and so many terrific memories.
No, absolutely. I mean, well, first of all, Dempy would be upset if we didn't do this with a glass of wine in hand. So anyone out there that's watching, if you have some wine, this is going to be a toast to Dempy and his legacy. He was a true gentleman, a friend, a mentor, an amazing wine advocate. And he was he was really the first young gun of the South African wine industry. You said it perfectly. He always had a twinkle in his eye when he was telling stories. He was always there to help. This void is colossal that is going to be missed in the wine industry. But his spirit and his positive energy is living on in those who he touched and affected. And then the wines that those people produce that wouldn't have been possible without him really paving the way. Really being a trailblazer for decades in the South African wine industry. So here's to Dempie, and we miss you and we love you.
Fabulous man. We do raise many glasses indeed. Now, I think it's a relationship that you're now having with another generation of winemakers. I want to ask Gynore about that for just a second. But Samantha, if I can ask you as well, I know you will have come across not just Dempie himself, but the legacy of Dempie Bailey. He was one of those people that you felt you knew him even before you'd met him, because every third wine conversation had Dempie Bailey come in because of his impact and what he left, what he leaves behind for South African wine. I think is a genuinely proud legacy and one I'd like to think he'd be really happy with.
Yeah, I met him because when Greyton, we applied for Greyton to be its own wine of origin. It's quite an intensive process, and he came out. We looked at geological surveys, watersheds. He walked through the vineyards with us over and over again, and most importantly, he tasted the wines. And during that process, he told me the whole history of it. And he was really instrumental of lifting South Africa's wine of origin system from something quite standard, where Paarl would be the city boundaries of Paarl, to something that was definitely distinguished by terroir. And he was inspired by the French system, and he wanted South African wine of origin system to be taken seriously. And I learned so much from him during that time. And he again came out and went through similar processes when we went through the estate process. So in my early days, I spent time with him, and he had a link to UC California Davis. So I think there was a comfort and some familiarity with this foreigner, but because I was Californian, I think he felt a connection, and I definitely felt so comfortable with him. His legacy, as you say, is deep and rich, and goes, it will live on forever.
And it's a legacy that exists, and I don't say this lightly, it exists in pretty much every glass of wine you drink today in South Africa, because he did have such an impact in the formative years of South African wine and where it finds itself today. And I love that sense of him passing on the baton, passing on that knowledge, passing on the history, because it reflects very much what happens with so many of the guests we have on this particular show, who are passing on their knowledge to people who are watching the show, but also other people in the industry. Again, if I can ask you from that point of departure, give us a little bit of your story in terms of how you got into the world of wine, and then how you found yourself as chief lieutenant of the most important woman in wine.
Hi, everybody. So my journey started on Elsenburg, on the Agricultural Institute. I finished my studies in 2016, and then I went on as an intern in the Cape Winemakers Guild Protege program. That's where I met Andrea. I worked with Miles Moosop, then at Tukara. Then I went on to the Grendel, working with Charles Hopkins. And then in my third and final year, I came to work at Mullineux. And that's where Andrea saw the potential in me and decided to keep me.
I think it was more than just a sign to keep you. I think she was absolutely delighted she had the chance to work with you. What was it, Andrea, about this young winemaker that caught your eye, that made you think, hold on, we've got somebody special here?
Well, what's amazing about the Protege program within the Cape Winemakers Guild is they're not just people who apply for a position. They're people who start off fresh out of Elsenburg or Stellenbosch, and you get to watch them grow, and you see that potential in that time. So seeing Gynore as a first year protege to this amazing blossoming development as a confident young winemaker, as a third year protege. And then you realize the true potential that, the sky's the limit that they have. And, I really do believe, well, in a quote that Ruth Ginsburg said, where, it's fight for things that you believe in, but do it in a way that will make others want to join you. And, in a way I saw what she was going through and what I went through as a young intern. And, I was very lucky to have some fantastic female mentors in my life. And I wanted to nurture that and pay it forward myself, create a ripple effect that Gynore also one day will be able to take someone under her wing and show her what she's learned and lessons along the way. That being I hate to use the word role model, but someone that can be that mentor, but also, a confidant within the wine industry as well, to bounce ideas off of, that, maybe one feels more comfortable in that environment because you can see the similarities.
I'm very keen to hear a bit more about the women who did inspire you and are in part responsible for the gem that we have now within our South African wine industry. But let's introduce properly our fourth guest. Olivia joins us to talk extensively about Prosecco. But before we get into the Prosecco and look ahead to tomorrow and Prosecco Day, Olivia, your own wine journey, you've spent a bit of time in the industry. It started off with Winimark, is that right?
Yes, so as we were chatting earlier, I did cut my teeth in the wine industry in Winimark, and I was also incredibly privileged to have some phenomenal mentors during that time and over that journey, kind of guiding me and teaching me and helping me learn the vocabulary that I needed to work on to be successful within the space. Before that, I was actually in the restaurant industry, fell in love with wine there, and haven't looked back in 12, 13 years now. So that's basically how it all happened. I've always been in love with food and wine. Wine is a really big part of my heart, and I've been incredibly privileged to work with some phenomenal brands in the country. This is the first international one I've taken on, and I'm learning an absolute fortune and thoroughly enjoying that as well. And it's the intention to go forth and really, dedicate my life to understanding this beautiful synergy between man and nature. So that's me in a nutshell, I guess.
I'm sure it sounds to a lot of your friends like you've just got this perfect job. You sit with your feet up drinking Prosecco all day, and generally the wine industry looks like it's a lot of cool and a lot of good fun. But it is a bit tougher. It is a bit more demanding than people often realize. When you did fall in love with it, though, what was it specifically about wine that said, you know what, Olivia, this is where you want to be?
You know what it is? There's something about a bottle of wine when you put it down between people. And with all due respect to all of the other beautiful beverages that are available to us, they don't quite match up in that instance where there's an ability in a bottle of wine and a glass of wine to draw out the most human and authentic parts of people. And I think in that you really have the opportunity to express yourself and get to know people on that level and give them the space to be authentic and themselves with you. And I suppose it goes back to Proverbs about, men speaking truths only when they've been filled with wine. But I think it's just, there's heart in it. There's heart in the production from step one, from day one. And I really am a big believer that pulls through into what we notice as a product, or what we call a product at the end of the day, that doesn't really pull through into many of the other consumables that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. A lot of the time when people ask me why wine, my return question is, what do you own in your life that took a minimum of a year to make, if not more? And what do you have in your home that somebody dedicated that much time and heart to? And that's the element that really, truly resonates with me.
I think we can see we have a very passionate member of the wine community. I love the fact that you refer to the people and to the community, because that for me is a recurring highlight of spending time with the South African wine industry. And Sam, you can attest to that more than most, because the wine community came around you and supported you extraordinarily and have done over the last couple of years. I get the sense from a few posts I've seen as we get an update on Lismore that there is a horizon of sorts in sight, and that it looks like Lismore might almost be back to where it was before the tragedy of the fire.
The South African wine industry, a fire, for those who don't know, a fire came out of the mountain in December of 2019 and destroyed everything on the farm, and the cellar, the 19 vintage, and our home, and some vineyards, and just everything living and green on the farm. And the South African wine industry, led by Alex Dale and Andrea, coordinating them, really came together to make sure that I had a 2020 harvest. This was weeks before harvest was meant to start. And they donated cellar space, grapes, services, transport, money, just everything they could. And, when I was trying to figure out where I was going to sleep, they were quite determined as a community to make sure that Lismore carried on and that I made wine. And so here we are 18 months later. We were finishing the cellar as we were making the 2021 harvest in it, but the cellar is back up. It was my beloved red shed before, and there it is. And it basically went up exactly as it was, same builder. And I'm very, very proud to have it back up and running. And we are planting 6 hectare vineyards, and we should be going home within the next month. So things are looking up, and we certainly wouldn't be here without the love and significant support of the South African wine industry. The way that they embraced us and held us and lifted us up was incredible.
And without taking away from that, there is a kind of a superwoman perception to you, that you managed to take on these extraordinary challenges and these hurdles and obstacles and somehow still keep coming back. When you look now at the rebuilt cellar, at the shed, at everything having come back to life, was there ever a point where you genuinely wondered if, maybe I'm not going to get back to here, maybe this last hurdle has been just too much?
Well, yeah, I mean, against all odds, Lismore was an old dairy, and I planted the vineyards and built the business from nothing. And, when everything was gone, I couldn't imagine that God's plan was that I needed to build it a second time, like from nothing. Are you kidding? And it was probably about 5 days after the fire, I woke up and looked at my partner and said, maybe I should just go away and just disappear. And he said, I don't think they're going to let you, Samantha. I think they've already started putting stuff together for you, and you don't really have a choice. And so, in the end, I've had to build it twice. It was easier and faster the second time around, doing it in 18 months rather than 14 years. But superwoman or not, I was pushed with a lot of force from my colleagues, and pulled from the customers and fans and my agents, and so they gave me that momentum when I wasn't quite sure if I should get up off the ground. And then from there, it was up to me. I had to take it and make it happen. And so, soon enough we'll be able to put it behind us. There's that.
I can tell you there was no way you were ever leaving. Andrea actually had sentries posted around just in case you tried to escape South Africa, because we certainly can't afford to lose you. Your wine is just far too good, and you're too valuable a part of our wine community. When we spoke a little earlier, Andrea, about women inspiring, and I'll find out who's in a moment. But when you look at the story of Samantha and of Lismore, it really is as inspiring a story of women in wine in South Africa as we have.
Yeah, I mean, Samantha's story is incredible. I mean, oftentimes I like to think of it as, she's living what we call the American dream, but in South Africa. She came here, she worked hard, she had an empty plot of land and created this kingdom of, W.O. Grayton and some of the most incredible wines to come out of the country. Her Viognier, her Syrah. I mean, they're not just good for South Africa. They're seriously world class wines. And that started with just a dream, in a vision to take this amazing plot of land and let the world see the story of the terroir.
And I've been lucky enough to be out there. In fact, I remember arriving in Grayton, not really believing there can actually be wine being made out there. And it is such a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. One of our inspirations is certainly Sam. What about the others for you, Andrea, the other women who have helped guide you, helped push you, helped inspire you to find your way to where you are now as a acclaimed winemaker and chair of the Cape Winemakers Guild?
It's very easy to be inspired by women that come from multi-generational wineries. Internationally, people like Gaia and Laura Catena are just amazing inspirations because they're carrying on a legacy. But equally and almost more influential in my life are other winemakers that were first-generation winemakers. The trailblazers that paved the way. So Norma Radcliffe is just this incredible inspiration. She was one of the first chairs of the Cape Winemakers Guild, and just made such an incredible name for herself with Warwick in South Africa, as well as Zelma Long, who is also American, but also has deep roots in South Africa too.
We kind of like these Americans are finding their way into the wine world. Again, I know you're particularly like them. You've got this wonderful relationship with Andrea. You've already spoken about the inspiration she's provided. It's manifested itself into something quite special, and we wanted to talk about this with Chapang Molisana a little earlier on in the week. Unfortunately, we had a few connection issues. So I'll ask you to give it a bit of an introduction, if you will, Gynore. Tell us what Great Heart is, not just from the wine perspective, but also from the story behind and the impact that it's having on the community around Mullineux.
So we started Great Heart last year with the first lockdown. We wanted to do something for our people, for our employees. So Great Heart started as a employee-owned company where all the employees are shareholders of the company, but also the directors of the company. So not just uplifting them in the sense of being a shareholder, but also gaining skills as to business management and all of that stuff, giving their input in the vineyards, in the winery, in the sales department, everywhere. So that's what Great Heart's all about. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the idea of mentorship. It's not just about, giving someone something or sharing profits, but it's about, teaching and allowing people to grow and the real mentorship behind it. Mm-hmm. So that's why the employees of Great Heart are also the directors, but the employees of Mullineux still maintain their roles as well as mentors.
And it's such a great story in so many levels, in that you are empowering so many people around you, but also you're delivering some really great wine. And I think, and I'm not sure if this is you, Andrew, if it's Chris, somebody's got the maths horribly wrong, because this wine is selling at 120 Rand a bottle in Pick and Pay. Once they've worked it out and they put the prices up to where they should be for the quality of wine, then it'll change. But run out now, buy the wine quickly. It's at a ridiculous price, and it is such great wine. And we're going to be tasting some Mullineux wine just a little later on the show. Not the Great Heart, but the Mullineux Syrah, which is on the horizon. Before we do that, though, let's jump back to our honorary Italian and the world of Prosecco. And it's something that's not drunk nearly as much in South Africa, obviously, as in Europe, but Prosecco breakfast and Prosecco brunches, very big in the UK in particular. For somebody who's watching Olivia, I go, Prosecco, I know it's sort of bubbly, but is it the same as champagne? Is it the same as Cup Classique? Is it something completely different? The beginner's guide to Prosecco, if you will.
All righty. So first and foremost, one of the kind of key lines I use is no, it's not champagne, it's not MCC, and it's certainly not intended to compete with that in South Africa. In the same way, I often say Windhoek and Fanta are both carbonated. It doesn't put them into the same category. So Prosecco, its history lies in the kind of culture and the humanness in Italy. It was historically known as Porcino wine, and it was produced in much smaller batches in homesteads. And the reason for its style was because they were trying to create something that could cater for the multiple generations that were around the dinner table, as well as all of the interesting goodies and ingredients that were on the dinner table that's so typical of that Italian lifestyle. And they wanted a wine that was an easy accompaniment and that added a little bit of sparkle to your moment, but didn't overtake it at all. And that's really what Prosecco is about. So yes, it is sparkling. In Italian, we refer to it as a frizzante. So it's slightly less sparkling than one would expect if one is more familiar with the likes of a Method Cup Classique or a Champagne. It is produced slightly differently as well, in that Method Cup Classique is actually produced in the same way as Champagne. It's referred to as a Method Cup Classique because it's produced here in South Africa, and Champagne legally needs to be produced in Champagne to be called that. And that's a traditional method where the second fermentation that takes the wine from still to sparkling actually occurs inside of the bottle. The major difference between that and Prosecco is that Prosecco uses a Chamat method, and the second fermentation actually occurs in a much bigger tank. And the reason for that primarily is because Prosecco is made from a grape called Glera that's exclusively grown in the northeast of Italy. And it is very, very delicate and light in style. And if one had to, do the second fermentation inside of the bottle, do the dosage and the second inoculation, the yeast notes on that wine that we've grown to love in our champagnes and MCCs would completely overpower those very, very delicate notes in Glera. So in a nutshell, no, it's not. It doesn't need to replace Champagne or Method Cup Classique in your household or in your bar or in your average day to day. It's just perfect to start drinking when you wake up in the morning and carry on drinking all the way through the day, and drink it with anything that you feel inclined to eat and with anybody that you feel inclined to socialize with. And that's what makes it, so much fun. It's a lot lighter. It's not quite as serious. It's just something to add a little bit of sparkle wherever you feel you need it.
As Skulkberger would say, a very gregarious wine. You mentioned the Glera, the grape. If we look at Champagne, made from Chardonnay, made from Pinot Noir, made from Pinot Meunier, you've got a few grapes you can play with. In South Africa, we go even further. People like Ken Forrester making it out of Chenin Blanc, although Ken would make Shiraz out of Chenin Blanc if he could. Is it only one grape for Prosecco? Is that it?
So there is a legality around Prosecco. It's produced in an area called the DOC. It's an independent board that demarcates an area. DOC stands for Denominazione di Origine Controllata. And yes, it has to be exclusively Glera. They do have wiggle room of about 15% where they can add varietals such as Viognier and Pinot Grigio are often used. But outside of that, you have to have a minimum of 85% Glera in the bottle to legally call it a Prosecco.
All right, getting an education in the world of Prosecco. What does it taste like? Well, we'll find out shortly because we've got not one but two different Proseccos to try ahead of International Prosecco Day tomorrow. Let's head back to Lismore and to Samantha. In terms of the wine that you're making at the moment, Sam, the grapes, given the damage to the farm, are there still any grapes? Are there still any vines on the actual farm? What are you bringing in? Where are you bringing it in from? If we can just get you to unmute there, Sam.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
There we
My
go.
dogs have been barking, so I've kept the mute going. About 40% of the vineyards were burned, but only 2.5 hectares have been pulled out. And so, yes, in 2021, we were able to bring Lismore fruit in. I already started buying a Cape South Coast fruit from all my prestigious neighbors in the cool climate area of Cape South Coast from 2015. So I already had those relationships. And yeah, we are, as of 2021, in my cellar, we are trying to pick up and move forward just as we were before we began. One of the special surprises was amongst the many donated grapes last year, and I can say thank you to Andrea and Reinica and Guru Consentia and amongst many others, was a Stanford Chenin Blanc. And so cool climate Chenin Blancs we don't see very often in South Africa. And it was such a pleasant surprise. It's mineral and crunchy and really, really exciting. And so I used some of it for my very first Cape Winemakers Guild wine. The auction's coming up soon. And I did a blend with that Chenin Blanc, but we're also going to release a Lismore Chenin Blanc, which is one of origin Walker Bay. So there's some like cool, exciting things that actually came of it.
Yeah, some silver linings of what's been discovered. And it's one of the real beauties. Somebody was asking me today in the important meeting I had for 5 hours on the golf course what my favorite type of wine was and what I like. And it's impossible to answer. But what I did say was in South Africa, what I really love about this country from the wine perspective is there is just so much to discover, and you keep discovering. And it's not just a new estate or a new label, it's a new grape or a new interpretation of something you thought you already know. It seems that's still the case for you, Sam, that you're discovering not just what you can make with wine yourself, but what the potential is for the different regions and the different grapes that we have in South Africa.
100%. You know, one of the most exciting things that's happened during my time in the wine industry is that we've discovered, I believe, that Chenin Blanc, I think, is the South African grape. You know, we have these amazing old vines, and top producers in South Africa have released wines that are scoring amongst the best in the world and have a terroir expression and a place expression that's like nothing else. It's not like the Loire. You can't put them side by side. It's South African Chenin Blanc. And yet here is an example where, you know, not many people have experimented with planting Chenin in South Africa in extreme cool climate, the same way that I planted Chardonnay, Viognier, and Syrah in a completely unique climate. And so it's really exciting. You know, in the Cape South Coast, I'm surrounded by pioneers. Anthony Hamilton Russell's father was the first, and everybody around me, no one's been there more than 40 years. So we're all just seeking the potential, and there's new sites being planted every day.
I love the excitement that's still in your voice, Sam. It's terrific. I was drinking some of your Viognier. In fact, I messaged you. I was having some lunch at Tang last week, and we had a bottle of Viognier that just sang its way through lunch. And it sounds like there is even more excitement to come. And I think Ina Smith will be doing cartwheels and star jumps if she knows you're making a Chenin Blanc. We've got a whole pile of people watching at the moment, so let's bring in a few of those comments. Grant Sauls watching over on YouTube. What an all-star lineup, Dan. I love all the wines from these ladies, and rightly so, Mr. Sauls. Greg Sherwood, who does less work than anybody I know and drinks more wine in the process. Greg Sherwood watching the great show from a sunny summery Isle of Wight, drinking a wonderful glass of Nordia Old Vine Colombard. Send my love to Andrea and Sam. Missing you both lots. Can't wait to catch up over a few nice bottles soon. Come back to South Africa, Greg. We miss you. Reginald Petnoy at Cheetah Plains in the Sabi Sands. My favorite lady, Master Andrea, you're simply the best. Every vintage of your old wine, Vine White. It's a new encyclopedia of 27th letter in it. Words are not enough to express my obsession in your wines. Big up, Mademoiselle. Reggie, I love your messages. They are the very, very best. And then a question here, Andrea, for you from Balushaba, saying, can I ask Andrea whether the empowerment company has any ownership of land? I commend the move to create a company for employees where they don't just sit and receive a dividend, but actually understand the business model, industry, and trends. The education and director training is paramount. I speak purely from watching too many restituted spaces in KwaZulu-Natal failing because of lack of knowledge and support. I know it's a very hands-on operation. Everybody's very involved. Andrea, can you provide a response there to Nontaba?
So right now, Great Heart Wines is not a farm. It is a wine company. So the vineyards are all vineyards that are currently managed by Mullineux and Liu family wines, and the facilities are managed by Mullineux and Liu family wines. But the winemaking company is Great Heart Wines, where the fermentation, sales, packaging, distribution is all handled by the employees of Mullineux and Liu Family Wines, which make up the company of Great Heart Wines.
All right, well, there we go. I think that's clarified that nicely. It's a company that's generating a huge amount of excitement for the nature of it, but also the quality of the wine. Before we try some of the Mullineux wine, again, just give me a sense of what it's like to work with, to learn from, not just Andrea, but Chris as well as a winemaker, and that experience of slowly finding your own feet, seeing what they're doing, learning from all the experiences you've had, and becoming a winemaker very much now on your own terms.
Yeah, so I came from a background where nobody was winemakers. I sort of just jumped into the winemaking thing. And I have to say I was an introvert in the sense of I didn't ask questions. I didn't speak to anybody. But within the Cape Winemakers Guild Protege program, I met Miles and Charles and Andrea and Chris. And they taught me how to voice my opinion, for instance. They taught me how to grow, how to not be insecure about anything, and just the attention to detail. Working with Andrea and Chris, they put a lot of effort into what goes into the bottle. They pay attention, as with anybody else at the Mullineux and Liu family wines. And that's really what I've gained so far. Just that attention to detail and the mentorship and growing with him. So, yeah.
The fact that you don't come from a wine family background, what was the response, first of all, from your family when you said, I'd like to make wine, this is my career? And what's the response now when they see where you are and what you've done?
Yeah, so I actually kept it a secret from them. I just took them with the register, my mom and dad, and they were blown away because they didn't know where this came from. But they let me do me, let me do what I want to do and not bully me into doing what anybody else is doing. And I have to say they are extremely proud of what I've achieved and what else I can still achieve in the wine industry. Yeah, it's just been such a great experience working with winemakers, not just in the wineries, but also the mentorship that you get outside of the wine industry, the winery, and yeah, just the life lessons and everything.
Lessons which have included making the flagship wines alongside Chris and Andrea and getting first-hand experience therein. We're going to try that wine in a moment. It is the Syrah, so we'll leave it to the last of them. We've got some barrel-fermented Sauvignon Blanc, which I haven't had for a little while yet. But let's kick off with the bubbles, which I've been quietly sipping off screen every time we've jumped away from camera. There are two bottles here. They confuse me enormously, Olivia. My Italian is limited to the names of assorted footballers and a couple of pasta dishes at my local restaurant. So let's start off with the Valdo Prosecco DOC Extra Dry. I now know what DOC means. It's not a medical reference. The Extra Dry. Tell us a little bit. In fact, I can tell you about this. So here you go. Vino spumanto Prosecco dal bouquet delicatamente frutato e caratteristico, ottimo come aperitivo, ma piacevole anche a tutto pasto, temperatura di servizio 6 to 7 degrees. Have I got that just about right, Olivia?
Absolutely phenomenal, Dan. Very well executed. Buonanotte, as they would say. That was incredible. I probably couldn't do as well as you did there. But you've got it in a nutshell. I'm sure everybody picked it up. It's a beautiful, easy little wine to drink. So yes, we've covered DOC and Gynore, but Prosecco Valdo is produced in an area called Valdobiadene, which is kind of where the heart of Prosecco resides. Beautiful. The DOC is an extra dry, so that means it's a little perplexing, but it actually means it's more plush and there's a little more sugar to it than a brut. There's about 12 grams of residual sugar per liter on an extra dry. So that's where the very gentle fruit-forward elements of the wine are approachable to a slightly younger palate that's still finding its groove and still resonates with a little bit more of a sweeter note. But because of the minerality that pulls through from the terroir in Valdobiadene, as well as the kind of very, very aromatic and floral notes that come through in the nature of Gynore, you land up with a wine that is just so approachable. It's vivacious in the way it kind of brings itself into your space, but it's just an easy one. So that extra dry is kind of the benchmark for Prosecco. It's the most authentic expression of what you're going to get in Prosecco. They do have derivatives as you go along, and that's probably what your second bottle is about. This is just about an easy bottle of wine to put on your table and enjoy with the people that you love.
I see there is no date on it. Would this then be the Champagne Cup Classique equivalent of a non-vintage? And if so, do you get a vintage Prosecco?
Yes, you do. So you're quite correct. This is a non-vintage, and a typical Prosecco would be non-vintage. However, particularly with Valdo, because they produce exclusively Spumante and Prosecco or sparkling wine, they have experimented over the years. So you do get vintage or more aged Proseccos. You also get some interesting derivatives in that they've produced Gynore traditional style. They've produced some of the traditional champagne grapes in Chamat style. So there's a plethora of options when you dive into the world of Italian sparkling wine and Spumante, and you really can taste or have the opportunity to taste any direction you feel the grape should be taken in.
All right, well, that is the first of them. The second one has actually got some English on it, so I'm a little more familiar. But the name is something of a mouthful. Valdobiadene Prosecco Superiore. I think I can work out the Superiore section. What is the Valdobiadene, or that Oro Puro on the front? Effectively, what am I drinking? How does it differ to what was in my previous glass?
Alrighty, so Valdobiadene is the area that is in the north of Italy between Veneto and Friuli, and that's where Valdo as a producer is situated and where Prosecco started. The biggest difference between the two bottles that you're enjoying, Dan, is first and foremost, you'll note that one of them has a label called DOC, which we've covered, and the second has a label referring to the DOCG. So the DOCG is also Denominazione d'Origine Controllata. The G stands for Garantita. And as I mentioned earlier, the consortium is an independent board of any of the producers in Italy, and they stipulate the minimum production and quality requirements for the wines that they oversee and for the areas that they oversee. When you see that G added to the end, it's when they've recognized the product to be of exceptional quality. So we're very proud to say that is one of Valdo's Proseccos that have been recognized as some of the best Prosecco that you can drink in the world. What's also really, really special and what really resonates back to where my heart lies in wine is Valdobiadene and the DOC region, which is quite a lot smaller, or the DOCG region rather, is quite a lot smaller, has actually recently been declared a UNESCO heritage site. And the reason for that is the hills or mountains that one sees in Valdobiadene in Italy are actually ancient sea dunes that were solidified through the planting of vineyards over the last 120 years by these small homesteads. And it's one of the first times in the history of documented man that we've actually contributed and created a micro ecosystem that allows for these grapes to grow in a beautiful way. And the grapes that are in that bottle come exclusively from those hills. So everything is hand harvested, and they come from a very, very, very small region within the Valdobiadene area.
I suspect if you weren't already deciding to try some Prosecco tomorrow for International Prosecco Day, you have now been suitably persuaded by Olivia to strikingly different bottles, each with their own certain loveliness and charm. And if your Prosecco journey is one like mine that is just beginning, then I think this will give you a nice introduction to a couple of different styles. Let's head down to Grayton, where they don't make Prosecco, but they make just about everything else, because Samantha has a great deal of fun with the wine, including this barrel fermented Sauvignon Blanc. It's not something we see a huge amount of in South Africa. Explain, if you will, Samantha, Sauvignon Blanc versus barrel fermented Sauvignon Blanc. Again, for people who perhaps don't really understand what the difference is here, what sets this apart, and what's the drive towards making this particular style?
Yeah, Dave, sorry, Dan, my dogs are freaking out on this side, so if they interrupt us, I'm really sorry. Dan, over the years, you and I have explored the Chardonnay, the Viognier, and the Syrah, and so I thought today we'd look at the barrel fermented Sauvignon Blanc, which is a totally different expression of Sauvignon Blanc in South Africa. What you'd expect from South African Sauvignon Blanc is something fresh and fruity and, really crisp on a warm afternoon. And I actually have taken Sauvignon Blanc in a totally different direction. So winemakers who make the other style of Sauvignon Blanc, they work in big cold tanks. They work very hard to keep the juice away from oxygen. And they use inert gases and sulfur and dry ice in order to protect it, because grape juice, like an apple, oxidizes the moment it hits the air. So when you slice an apple, the apple starts to turn brown immediately. The same thing happens with grape juice. And in my situation, I actually intentionally turn the apple brown. I press the Sauvignon Blanc juice, but I allow it to oxidize along the way. So it's at the juice phase where this wine becomes unique in its own right. And then it's put into large barrels, 500-liter barrels, and concrete eggs, and fermented with its own natural yeast, and left for a full year. So you get a wine that's creamy and textured and complex, and a very different expression of Sauvignon. And I really wanted to share that with you, because, I think Sauvignon Blanc is treated like a one-dimensional grape, and yet there's a whole spectrum. And I think that this wine sits in a different space on that spectrum and really gives you something to explore.
Dare I say this might be Sauvignon Blanc for people who don't like Sauvignon Blanc?
Yeah, I say that all the time. Yeah, it's exactly that. That's actually why I made it in the style that I made it. There were enough fresh and fruity Sauvignon Blancs, and I didn't have all the fancy equipment at the time, but what I did have was old barrels. And so I thought, well, like in France, they just, get the juice and put it into barrels. Surely I can try that. And so over the years, I've refined the technique, but the bottom line is that I kind of went my own way and hoped that the customers would enjoy it. And when I tasted it from the barrel, it was so delicious. And, there actually are a lot more barrel fermented Sauvignon Blancs than people know, but they're usually given quite pretentious names. So you think you're drinking a blend rather than barrel fermented Sauvignon. And I just decided I wanted the customer to understand what was in the bottle. If they didn't like it, fine. And if they did like it, they knew what they were liking.
I don't think you need my answer on whether or not I like it, because we've had this conversation a couple of times in the past. I do want to ask you one more question about it, though. The fact that it's got some wood in there, does this mean that this is a Sauvignon Blanc that can already be aged without wood, because we drink our Sauvignon Blanc far too quickly, but this is one that can go a bit further? This one's got maybe a longer lifespan as a white wine.
100%. And thank you for bringing that up. It actually... yes, it's because of the wood, but it's also because of the oxidative nature of the way that the juice is treated. So it's not fragile. All of the fragility has been beat out of it in the early stages of the making of this wine. So, it's a wine that is actually meant to age. We are still tasting the bottles that exist outside of the library that was destroyed, 2009s, 2011s. It actually gets better over time. The fruit becomes more intense over time. And South Africans are often told that if it's over a year, it's going to taste like tinned asparagus, and you can't drink it. And when it's made in this style, it actually gets more floral, more fruit, and much more interesting. And that's why I sent you the 2018, but even older ones are better. So yeah, it definitely, it can age, made to age.
I think I've got a 2012 hidden away somewhere, so I might have to bring that out in the next little while. Really, it's a wine to give a try to, whether you don't like Sauvignon Blanc or whether you do. And it's also a food that gives such a rich dimension to a range of different food. And you're getting some heavy hitters watching this. Samantha Corlea Fourie was a guest just a couple of weeks ago. Loved listening to that, Sam. Hoping to share one with you soon.
One of my favorite winemakers. Hello, Corlea.
She's absolutely fabulous. A magician with Chenin Blanc, but a wizard just across the board, really. Corlea, lovely to have you on the show. And Incroyable Shaba, fabulous Dan. Valdo, such a fantastic experience. Great to learn more about it. Thank you, Olivia, for these amazing insights. And Greg Sherwood. Yes, Dan, the 2012 Lismore barrel fermented is lovely. What that translates to is, Dan, I would like to come and drink it with you. No, Sherwood, you've got more than enough wine yourself. Stop trying to steal what little remains of my collection. Let's jump over to our final wine then and back to our team at Mullineux, to Gynore and to Andrea. The Mullineux Syrah, it's become a bit of a cult wine, this. And when you leap to get your hands on as soon as you can. Give us a sense here, Andrea, by way of introduction, the style of this wine, to what extent it's the terroir and the vineyards dictating it, and to what extent this is you and Chris putting your own personal stamp on a style of Syrah.
Well, first of all of a sudden I'm noticing we're all sending you samples, but I think next time we all need to have each other's samples, because listening to Olivia and Sam talk about those wines, I'm definitely thirsty for those too. But happy with the glass of Syrah I have, which I'll chat about now. So I mean, the Swartland, it's a wild, beautiful place. It's predominantly 3 main soil types. So we have these rolling red hills outside of Malmesbury, which is about an hour north of Cape Town. So very, very quick to get there from Cape Town for anyone who wants to visit. So these rolling red hills that give us these rich, deep, round, sexy tannin wines. And then these rocky outcrops, Castilberg Mountain, which is predominantly schist and is actually where the Mullineux home is. You get more structured brooding wines coming out of there. And then the Paardeberg, which is a granite outcrop, and these refined, long, very perfumed wines coming out of there. So the main red grape in the Swartland is Syrah. It's the perfect home for Syrah. We have a beautiful diurnal variation, so warm days so that we can ripen the Syrah beautifully, but still very cool nights. So that it maintains freshness and the perfume that we're looking for. So the Swartland Syrah is about round yet structured tannins, beautiful perfume. All of the wines I make are only indigenous yeast and mallow, meaning it's the yeast that grow on the grapes themselves. With the warm, dry, breezy climate, it's very conducive for more natural farming, which allows us to work with just the indigenous yeast. And then this Syrah, so in South Africa, we're allowed to say Syrah or Shiraz. And the people who are inspired maybe more by fruitier, fuller styles of this grape tend to call them Shiraz. And ones who are more spice influenced and maybe more mineral and the nuances that you can get in this grape tend to call it Syrah. We do choose to call it Syrah, and it is a blend of those 3 soil types that I was talking about. So it's 100% Syrah, but I use the soil types, the freshness and the linear tannins from the granite soils, the more round plush Syrahs that we get from the iron soils, and the structure and the natural concentration from the schist soils. And it's also what we refer to as whole cluster fermentation, crushed whole clusters, meaning that we leave the stems intact with the grapes. The stems are part of the vine. They're like a magnifying glass onto the soil on which those grapes grow. So I love including the stems. It again brings a fresh grip and just a gorgeous floral lift. So it's a pretty cold day here in the Cape. It was pretty much about 3 degrees this morning. Frozen hands, it's pruning season. And so perfect time for a lamb stew and some very aromatic Syrah tonight.
Reminds me of the new wines from the Harry Hartman Wine Company. Their one is called Some Say Syrah, because, of course, some say Shiraz. Again, a final word from you, just quickly. What's it like working on this particular wine, working on these wines with Chris and Andrea in particular, that have become such an iconic South African range, and having a hand in some of South Africa's most celebrated wine?
Yeah, I've always said I've been so blessed over the past few years, working with great mentors, working with great wines. And I think this Syrah is a true expression of the Swartland, which I grew up in. I'm from Malmesbury, so I'm a Swartlander by heart. And I think this Syrah in particular gives a very true expression of the soil, of the different terroirs we have in the Swartland, and just making wine from the vineyard to the winery as natural as possible, I think is so beautiful. I mean, just leaving and letting it be, like just letting it grow by itself. It's almost like raising a baby, but just leaving it on the side there. But yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and it's still an amazing journey. And I hope to make much more Syrahs with Andrea and Chris.
I suspect we have got a huge amount of wine coming from you in the years to come, Gynore, and it's very much the start of a career that's already catching a lot of eyes, turning a lot of heads. Jana Brecker, thank you, Andrea. Always great to listen to your passion. And I think that has shone through from everybody today as we wrap up another terrific episode of the show. I knew my mother would come on at some point. Helen Nicol, I might be forced to go and open my last bottle of Mullineux Syrah. Very enjoyable show. What that means, that's a little bit of maternal pressure saying, get me some more Mullineux Syrah now, or you are not a good son. So, right, I'm off to do some shopping as soon as this is done. Guys, to all four of you, thank you so much. Not just an education in Prosecco and an introduction to a really interesting style of Sauvignon Blanc and the great story of both Great Heart and Mullineux, but also another wonderful illustration has been getting all month of the extraordinary women we have in South African wine. So thank you all very much for being part of the show. And I said when we chatted offline, Sam, that I was going to make a pledge. Well, here is my pledge. Once I get a little bit more mobile and we can travel a little more freely without clouds of pandemics hanging quite so closely above us, I am on my way to Lismore. I still remember with great fondness sitting on the deck with you on my first visit many years ago on the Cape Epic. Well, I'm coming back. You can't stop me. I'm bringing my cameraman, and we're going to come down, taste some wine, and come and spend some time with you down there. And as long as you'll have us, we'll be down very happily and very excitedly.
I can't wait to welcome you. It'll be so cool. Thanks so much.
All right, there we go. To all of you, to Samantha, to Gynore, to Andrea, to Olivia, thank you so much for being part of the show. Really appreciate it, and happy drinking.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thanks so much.
There we go. What a terrific quartet of guests. Remember that tomorrow is International Prosecco Day, so get down to Pick and Pay, grab yourself a bottle of Valdo, and try out something just a little different. Maybe open it with a bottle of Cap Classique and see how the two of them compare and contrast. And while you're there, you tend to find some Lismore and some Mullineux as well, and especially that Great Heart. So some Pick and Pay shopping on the horizon. Although tomorrow's Friday, isn't it? When will these wretched regulations change? Well, if you can't get them till Monday, get them then and do a retrospective analysis. Women in Wine continues next Monday. Now, next Wednesday is International Pinot Noir Day. It's some wine day every day of the week, but it's a really cool one next week. And so on Monday, previewing International Pinot Noir Day, we have got Barine Sauls from Tessel Rasdal up in the Himalanada Valley. We also have Jessica Sarvain with her new releases. Kathy Marshall trying some Claypot Pinot Noir, and the wonderful Caroline Martin from Creation, part of the dynasty that is one of the great families in South African wine, the Finlayson. So that's all to come next Monday. Until then, I'm going to say goodbye. I've got to jump on stage and host a dinner momentarily. As it's in Durban, there'll be some Durban chicken curry. I think my bubbles and my Sauvignon Blanc, Sauvignon Blanc will go down rather nicely. Wash it all down with some Syrah as well. Thanks to some wonderful guests. Thank you for watching the show. Thank you for supporting South African wine. And tonight, a little Italian as well. Have a lovely, lovely weekend. We'll see you back on Monday night. Goodbye. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.